On one of the coldest winter nights Chicago had seen in years, a little girl suddenly tugged at her father's sleeve as they stepped out of a charity gala. Expensive cars lined the street, camera flashes still sparkled behind them, and the city looked beautiful from a distance. But just beyond the bright lights, hidden beside a closed grocery store, a young homeless mother desperately wrapped her tiny baby in a paper-thin blanket that could no longer keep the freezing wind away. The baby's weak cries barely rose above the storm, before anyone else even noticed. The little girl looked up with frightened eyes and silently realized the terrible truth. That innocent moment changed 3 lives forever. If you believe that one act of kindness can completely change someone's future, please like this video, share it with your friends, leave a comment about where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. Jonathan Carter had spent years building one of the largest technology companies in the United States. Success surrounded him, yet his greatest treasure was never his wealth. It was his 8-year-old daughter, Grace. After losing his wife several years earlier to a sudden illness, Jonathan devoted every spare moment to raising Grace with compassion instead of privilege. While many people assumed a billionaire's daughter would grow up spoiled, Grace constantly surprised everyone with her gentle heart. Jonathan often reminded her that real wealth was measured by the number of lives someone helped, not by the size of a bank account. Those lessons would soon be tested in a way neither of them could have imagined. As father and daughter walked toward their waiting driver in downtown Chicago, Grace suddenly stopped. Across the sidewalk, she noticed a young woman sitting against a brick wall, trying desperately to shield an infant from the bitter wind. Snow covered their worn shoes. The woman's lips trembled from the cold, and exhaustion filled her pale face. The tiny baby hardly moved beneath the thin blanket. Most pedestrians hurried past without making eye contact. Some glanced briefly before continuing toward the warmth of nearby buildings. Grace couldn't understand how so many people could simply ignore what was happening, only a few feet away. Jonathan followed his daughter's gaze. The successful businessman who negotiated billion-dollar contracts suddenly found himself speechless. Grace gently squeezed his hand as tears formed in her eyes. She looked at the motionless baby and felt something break inside her innocent heart. The little girl realized that expensive dresses, luxury cars, and elegant celebrations meant nothing if a helpless child could freeze just outside the doors where people celebrated abundance. Without hesitation, Jonathan removed his expensive wool coat and carefully wrapped it around the infant. The young mother, whose name was Rebecca Collins, tried to thank him, but her voice barely came out. She explained that she had recently escaped an abusive relationship in another state and had arrived in Chicago hoping to find work. Instead, she lost the temporary job she managed to secure after her employer closed unexpectedly. Her savings disappeared within weeks. Shelters were overcrowded because of the severe weather, and every day became a desperate struggle to keep her 6-month-old son, Caleb, alive. Jonathan immediately called his security team, not to remove anyone, but to bring blankets, warm food, medical supplies, and transportation. Grace never left Rebecca's side. She gently held the baby's tiny hand while paramedics examined him. Caleb's body temperature had fallen dangerously low, and every passing minute mattered. The ambulance rushed them to a nearby hospital, while Jonathan and Grace followed close behind, praying silently that they had not arrived too late. Inside the emergency room, doctors worked quickly to stabilize Caleb. Rebecca sat alone in the waiting area, overwhelmed by fear and guilt. She blamed herself for every hardship her son had endured. Jonathan quietly sat beside her without mentioning his wealth or business achievements. He simply listened. For the first time in many months, Rebecca felt someone truly saw her as a human being, rather than another homeless statistic. Grace rested her head on Rebecca's shoulder, offering silent comfort that no words could match. Hours later, the doctor finally walked into the waiting room with encouraging news. Caleb would recover. The warmth, quick medical treatment, and timely intervention had likely saved his life. Rebecca collapsed into tears of relief. Jonathan closed his eyes with gratitude, while Grace smiled through tears, realizing that her decision to stop walking had changed everything. Most people assumed Jonathan's generosity would end after paying the hospital bills, but he believed saving a life meant helping someone rebuild it completely. The next morning, he arranged temporary housing for Rebecca and Caleb in a comfortable family apartment owned by one of his charitable foundations. He connected her with counselors who specialized in helping survivors of domestic abuse. His company's human resources department helped her prepare for interviews, update her resume, and develop new job skills. Jonathan refused to treat charity as a one-time gift. He believed real compassion created opportunities for lasting independence. Weeks slowly turned into months. Rebecca worked harder than she ever had before. She attended every training session, completed certification courses, and eventually earned a position in customer relations at Jonathan's company. Her natural kindness, resilience, and determination quickly impressed everyone around her. She arrived early, stayed late when necessary, and approached every challenge with gratitude rather than bitterness. Her coworkers admired her remarkable journey, though very few knew how close she and Caleb had come to tragedy during that freezing winter night. Grace continued visiting Rebecca and little Caleb almost every weekend. The two children developed a beautiful friendship despite their different beginnings. Jonathan watched his daughter laugh with Caleb and realized she was learning lessons no classroom could ever teach. Compassion had become more than a value spoken at home. It had become a way of life. Nearly a year after that unforgettable evening, Jonathan hosted his company's annual community celebration. Instead of delivering another speech about profits or expansion, he invited Rebecca onto the stage. Standing before hundreds of employees, community leaders, and local families, she shared the painful journey that had nearly ended in heartbreak, before one little girl's compassionate eyes changed everything. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience as she spoke about fear, hope, dignity, and the incredible power of being noticed when the world chooses to look away. Jonathan then announced the creation of the Grace Hope Initiative, a nationwide program dedicated to providing emergency shelter, childcare assistance, job placement, and long-term support for homeless single parents across the United States. Inspired by one child's simple act of kindness, the organization partnered with businesses and communities to ensure more families would receive help before reaching the point of hopelessness. The story spread across the country, but Jonathan never accepted praise for himself. Whenever reporters asked what inspired the initiative, he simply smiled at his daughter. Grace always reminded him that she hadn't done anything extraordinary. She had only stopped walking when everyone else kept moving. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that kindness still exists in our world, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments because your support helps these uplifting stories reach more people. Special request before this story ends, please comment with the words, "Kindness saves lives," if you believe that even the smallest act of compassion can change someone's future forever. Years later, Caleb would grow up hearing the story of the freezing night that almost stole his future. He would learn that his life was not saved by wealth alone, but by the compassionate heart of a little girl who refused to ignore another child's suffering. Jonathan continued leading his successful company, but every achievement afterward felt more meaningful because it was built alongside a mission of serving others. Rebecca rebuilt her confidence, created a stable home for her son, and eventually became a mentor for struggling single mothers beginning their own journeys toward hope. Their lives remained forever connected by one unforgettable winter evening in Chicago, proving that sometimes the greatest miracles begin with a child who simply looks where everyone else chooses not to. In a world often distracted by success, status, and personal ambition, the most powerful legacy anyone can leave is the courage to stop, care, and remind another human being that they are never truly alone.